The sport of powerlifting has certainly evolved since its inception, but 70s powerlifters just look like they're on another level. Big, strong, lean, dense. Were short shorts anabolic? Was it just a better time? Was it the food?
Yeah, we use mainly bats.
I mean, just look at these guys. Kazmaier, Esteps, Young. The difference was so pronounced that a pretty popular blog from a decade ago actually took on 70s Big as its title. And in their Hall of Fame of overtly masculinized freaks from that era were the likes of Doug Young and Anatoly Pizarenko, who is rumored to have clean and jerked 600 pounds in training. At a body weight of 265. That's right around Lash's best at 380. So we're going to get to the bottom of the culture of strength that existed 50 years ago, how it contributed to some of the biggest monsters in history, and what's changed since. Stay tuned to the end because we're going to look at the 3 key takeaways that we can apply to our training right now to emulate the size, strength, and stamina of some of the most impressive performers in history. I'm also going to walk you through exactly how I use these principles for inspiration to write my program titled 70s Powerlifter, which is available for free on the BoostCamp app. And guys, I'm super proud to have BoostCamp as a primary sponsor of this channel. Not only is BoostCamp the easiest and most intuitive way to track your training and your progress, not only is it absolutely free to use, not only does it feature an immense library of some of your favorite programs, but it features an exclusive library of programs you will not find anywhere else. In fact, there's so much content there. I'm actually doing a series specifically dedicated to the programs that you will only find on BoostCamp. So if you don't want to wait till the end of the video to figure out how my program, 70s Powerlifter, is put together, stop what you're doing right now, click the link below, download BoostCamp. And guys, as I film this channel just hit 100,000 subs like 5 minutes ago, and that number would not have been possible without the support of sponsors like BoostCamp. So I want to thank you, the viewer, for your support, and I want to thank BoostCamp for their support. Now back to the show. Now, first things first, were they actually bigger and stronger? We do have a really bad habit of romanticizing bygone eras that we weren't a part of as having some X factor that made it special. If it happened a long time ago, somewhere far, far away, there must be some method, wisdom, or magic that they had that we just don't. We can look at all of the numbers that were put up by the lifters of this era, and even adjusting for differences in equipment, we can see that the numbers today really blow those numbers out of the water. For instance, the biggest benches of the 1970s look to come from the likes of Jim Williams with his 675 bench that was put up in 1972. Then we have guys like Don Reinhardt and Bill Kazmaier who got into the low 600s before 1980. Comparing that to today, there's 7 people who have checked off 700-pound bench presses and 150 lifters who have gone over 600 pounds in competition without a bench shirt. Don Reinhardt touted an 860 pull back in 1976, which looks to be the biggest competition lift of the 1970s, and you can compare that to the dozens of athletes who have since gone over 900 pounds. Joseph White held the biggest squat of the 70s with his 920 in wraps back in 1975, and that is also a far, far cry from Vlad Alizov's 1157. Which is still just a mind-blowing number. So we can see that the best performances have shifted forward a little bit. But on the other hand, Don Reinhardt did put up a 2391 total in wraps all the way back in 1975, and that was a world record that stood for almost 40 years. So on the one hand, we do have a bigger talent pool and we've seen more freakish demonstrations, but on the other hand, we still have some instances of numbers being put up at the very genesis of the sport that would still be highly competitive today. Now, we can't really attribute these differences to drugs because drugs have always been part of the equation. The big differences can really be attributed to the increase in size of the talent pool and the training culture that existed back then, and that's going to be where our focus is. So let's start with a story about one of the most notorious figures in strength culture, the Kazmaier. Bill Kazmaier was one of my first gym heroes. He was a loudmouth American who was built like a brick shithouse. And legend has it, was banned from World's Strongest Man for winning too much. Now, if that isn't an American excuse for getting expelled, I don't know what is. Maybe it was because he was a threat to the promoter's golden boy, or maybe it had something to do with him being a giant dickbag.
They know who I am.
I don't know
On TV, they know who I am. You know what the World's Strongest Man competition is, and he would never be invited because he's a pipsqueak.
So they'd be doing crank calls at night and shit like that. And him and his manager would do stupid stuff, just trying to get my head out of it so I wouldn't go for the record. I just had to block it. So I thought that was kind of bullshit of them lowering themselves to play games like that.
Anyways, this isn't about Kazmaier's sus behavior over the years. We're here to gain strength and size, not criticize. On that note, join me for my next installment where we go over athletic footwork drills from Oscar Pistorius and the Juice. Now, piece of shit or not, the fact is that Kaz was on another level. His powerlifting numbers were gross, sure, but the other stuff, like 315 cheat curls for reps, didn't even make sense to me at the time. 16-year-old me was so eager to figure out the source of this madness that I ended up driving out to the LA Fit Expo so I could listen to Kaz speak. This was back when it was in Pasadena, which is a few cities away from the hellmouth of Los Angeles where it is now. Kaz was giving a seminar earlier in the day, so I had to call off work to make sure that I could hear him speak. I made it there and eagerly sat down in a large conference room that was filled with a whopping 9 strongman nerds. Remember, this was back in 2006 before millions could be exposed to strongman through YouTube mukbang videos. Now, Kaz was a lot of things, but shy, humble, respectful were not on the list. He weaves stories about his greatest feats, and it always seemed to involve some dig at the other competitors. Like when he talked to us about squatting 800 pounds for a set of 10, before mentioning that Magnus for Magnuson had only done it for a single. He compared the talent of that era to his own, asking if anyone who could get beaten by the likes of Phil Pfister could really call themselves the GOAT.
I don't put Pujanowski on top of the heap at all.
And somewhere in between stories of entering his goldfish eating contest to help him get the 500 grams of protein per day that he needed, or the impact that switching to cold rolled steel can make in ripping a pec tendon off the bone, he did sprinkle in some insight to what his training actually looked like. I remember leaving with 3 key takeaways from that talk. The first one was hill sprints after meals, supposedly to help aid in digestion so you could eat more throughout the day, to increase conditioning, and to help spike hormone levels. Bill was big as shit and he had a football background, and there's no doubt that his willingness to do some actual road work contributed to his early strongman success. The second takeaway was to actively get bigger and tighter and more bound to increase compression at the bottom of the lift and help with your numbers. And takeaway number 3 was using a shit ton of work and reps in order to get there.
After 15 sets, I'm just smoking and can make it through a 70-set routine.
In listing off some of his best feats, many of which were high-rep gym sets, somebody raised their hand and asked if he thought reps were valuable for strength. Now, this was in the early 2000s, so it was around the time where the only type of powerlifting that existed really was equipped lifting, and the culture of powerlifting was dominated by very heavy, low-rep, strength-specific work. Bill's reply to the question, "Oh yeah, I love reps. I did 24 reps on the bench with 405. My jaw hit the floor. First off, that was just a stupid feat of strength. To have 400 pounds ride so easily in your hands that you can cycle through 24 pushes, Jesus Christ. Secondly, how could such high rep work contribute to that world-class level of strength? It wasn't specific. Now, there's 2 points of view that you can take. One is that genetics and steroids did what they do, which is to spread apart your MEV and MRV. Those 2 things together allow you to grow from less work, recover from more work, and respond to a wider variety of stimuli. Certainly that played a role. Now, the other point of view is that this guy, who looked like somebody put a cowboy collar on a tractor, was as big as he was because he did a ton of volume with huge amounts of weights. I'm inclined to think that that was also a really big factor. Now, in addition to being relevant to strongmen, high rep work does have some growth value, but it likely won't do much on its own. If you swap out all of your 5s and 6s for 25s and 30s, it's going to be like ice skating uphill. You're going to be expending a lot of effort to just slide backwards. But if you do it in conjunction with your more specific, heavier work, then you're working with synergy. Now you have strength, hypertrophy, and capacity variables that are all working together to build a bigger and more monstrous version of you. This program has been recycled all over the internet. It's been up since I started training like 20 plus years ago when bodybuilding.com was barely a thing. So you can find this program anywhere. It's been recycled more than a condom on Skid Row. So to start out, we have heavy light days. So his week looked like this. We have the first bench day. Notice there are 3 benching exercises done for 3 to 4 sets of 10 each. So regular bench, wide grip, narrow grip, and then a whole host of isolation movements, delt raises, seated presses, more raises, triceps. His second bench day, still same 3 exercises, regular, wide, narrow grip benching. You're looking at 9 to 10 total working sets per day on the week, 4 high rep sets, 4 sets of 10. That's a lot. especially with all this isolation stuff worked in. So the volume's very high, right? So that stands to reason. Big muscle building effect. The rep ranges are more in the hypertrophy range. He's putting most of his eggs in the compound movement basket. There's a pretty high frequency. This type of volume done twice per week, pretty crazy. And then you're looking at the lower body days. I mean, squatting and deadlifting on the same day. I know that gives you a lot of you guys heartburn just to look at it. Squatting heavy for 4 sets of 10, going into deadlifts for 3 sets of 10. You guys go ahead and try that workout. Get back to me with what percentages you were using. Now, it's really important to understand when you're looking at this that this isn't just like, oh, have good genetics, get on a ton of gear, and then do this shit. This takes a lot of time to ease into. They don't talk about the time it takes to adapt to volume. I've only heard professional lifters mention that a couple of times since I've been paying attention. It's one of the reasons I like the volumizing method, where you start with a few sets of high reps and then add sets over time as you acclimate to it. It takes time to adapt to this to where you can even hang with this amount of work. If you take the best genetic responders today that are on a shit ton of gear, you take a lot of these specialized powerlifters, have them do this, they'll be chewed up like that, okay? You can't just jump in. I would recommend starting with fewer exercises. I would recommend starting with a slower progression, and over time, trying to add until you get to this amount of work, assuming that you even need this amount of work to grow. So that's the week, right? Now let's go to how he progresses the week. So this is an example of a 10-week bench routine. So week 1, you're starting on his light day, 410 for 3 sets of 15. Jesus Christ. And the heavy day is 435 for 3 sets of 15. And we got wow from Steve Shaw. This is on muscleandbrawn.com. So shout out to Steve Shaw. Going to week 2, still on 15s, just 5 pounds heavier. Then 3 sets of 10 on the heavy day with 455. Week 3, a little bit heavier for 12s now, and then down to 8s on the heavy day with 480, down to 12s and 8s again, a little heavier, down to 10s and 5s, 10s and 5s, 8s and 5s. Now we're getting real heavy, down to 8s and triples, 6s and 3s, 6s and 3s. 635 for a triple. Not surprising for a guy that in basically a t-shirt did a 660 plus bench press in a competition with a relatively flat back, a very controlled pause, and a lot of speed. So that's the type of strength you need. That's the type of progression you need. So this is a very linear program. I mean, the little bit of complexity is managing the light and heavy days, but it's not that complex. They're offset and they move up together. I like the fact that reps are maintained as he peaks. So he is doing 8s and 6s to offset his work with triples in the last few weeks of the program. I kind of like that. And I think for a type of lifter who's used to that type of rep work being the foundation of their size and strength, that's probably more warranted. So I think of like Chad Smith, who's a very explosive athlete, genetically very gifted. But you look at like his juggernaut training. I identify a lot with him because his juggernaut program was based off the idea that you can hit a peak without having hit maximal fucking singles in your training. He would stay 100 pounds shy in his training and would base his stuff off rep work. And he was another guy that was really comfortable doing compound movements for really hard high rep sets. So as you get used to it, that makes sense to keep that thread alive. And I think also there's a training effect long term because you're not detraining so much as you go into the peak, where usually muscle kind of atrophies and falls away. That's something you want to concern yourself with, because normally the complaint of linear periodization is that when you're only doing 10s and 12s, specific strength is dropping, and when you're only doing singles, doubles, triples, the amount of mass you work so hard to gain is dropping. And you want the best of both worlds. That rationale is actually what spawned conjugate. So that makes sense. So that is Kazmaier's routine. Nutty amount of work, but a very deliberate progression. Now, Doug is a favorite from this era, partially because he was so strong, but also because he had a look that just emulated the 70s. If tattoos and top knots defined strength sports in the 2010s, then Doug's long hair, chest curls, and mustache were a walking bus advertisement for 70s powerlifting. He also had a super slow, deep drawl that was both inviting, but menacing.
It's simply, I don't do tricks. I'm not going to lift cars for people. I'm not a clown.
If he makes this lift, he'll win.
He's calling out to Larry. Larry Pacifico points up the finger number 1 and taps his chest.
I very much got a warrior in the garden type of vibe from this guy. Now the legend of Doug goes like this. He began using a simple auto-regulated bench press progression where he would add weight each week based on how he performed on an AMRAP in that workout. Now this allowed him to stay in a sweet spot where he wasn't going so light that he wouldn't grow, but so hard and heavy that he wouldn't recover. And like so many people that start with a simple progression like this, Doug added 240 pounds to his bench in a year. Genetics, yes. Gear, absolutely. But even today, we have a huge sample size of blessed genetics working with a lot of gear, and almost nobody makes this type of meteoric rise. Training also plays a very big role in how you grow, and I have to believe that his workmanlike adherence to a clean and consistent method of progression was a big factor in getting him stronger, faster than any of his peers. Where so many good athletes are inclined to default to whatever the fuck they feel like doing that day, a top level lifter saying this is exactly how I add weight each workout is definitely worth listening to. So we got Doug Young's program. This is another one that's been passed around the internet. I think everybody's had this on their blog at one point because it is a really cool example of like an old school program, very simple and straightforward, and it produced world record results. So his program that took him to this 540 pound bench press, 540 from 305, 235 pounds. His body weight jumped 80 pounds. This is one of those quick responders that Mike Israetel was talking about, because if you blast the entire town of Milwaukee with as much gear as you could find, you would not get these results out of just about anybody. This is a hyper responder. This is somebody who's going to get big as shit no matter how much gear they were on. Surely the gear helped, but these are just exceptional numbers. You're looking at the thing that got him to that 540 bench, 235 pounds in a year. Jesus. So working up singles, all the way up, top single 540, another top single at 540. Then notice the back off sets, a set of 9 and a set of 14. Very high rep back off sets. I'm a huge fan of back off sets because it's so easy to get it in. There's no excuse for it. You got post-activation potentiation going. You're going to hit more reps after that heavy single than you would otherwise. If you hit a single, I mean, even if it's a low RPE, just to do it, there's almost no reason not to drop the weight 10 or 20% and just rep it out. It's great for muscle growth, great for capacity, gives you another number to chase, to hit PRs in, to build confidence in what you're doing. Only reason you wouldn't, if you were doing like what Kazmaier was doing, where you're doing other variations that you need to be fresh for. So notice Doug did that and then went straight to his isolation work. So it makes more sense to burn out if you don't have other heavy compounds coming after that. So notice we got like 3 sets of 15 on a front raise, that's a burner. Then triceps, flies, 6 sets of 6. So not only low rep or kind of medium strength reps, which you've heard like Eddie Hall talks about 6s. You know, 6s are kind of like the 5s of the enlightened lifter. Very good for strength and size, those middle ground reps. So making good use of those. So what you see a lot of work with the compound stuff. He did this 3 days a week and has since apparently gone on record as saying, I wouldn't recommend this for anybody else. This is a very short-lived program during the most anabolic period of his life. But it just goes to show the amount of work, dedication, the psychology that goes into seeing those meteoric gains. This is a selling out type of program. I like that it's not overly complex. Same workout, 3 days a week over a wide variety of reps, a lot of isolation, not shying away from work, from volume, from reps. Now going into his off-season program, this is what I borrowed. This is the auto-regulated progression that I borrowed for Bull Mastiff. I was inspired by this because I really liked the way that it was auto-regulated. It was easy enough to explain to just about everybody, but just complex enough to do a really, really good job of managing fatigue for the individual. So starting off with bench, this time he'd work up on kind of an easy pyramid. These are all warm-up sets, 8, 6, 3, 2. Then he would hit 4 sets of 6 with his working weight. And on the last set, he would do as many reps as he can. So I write that as like 4x6 plus. That's a plus set. The last set is done as many as you can. And he adds 5 pounds to his next weight for his next session for each extra rep he gets. So if you only get 6, you don't add weight. But if you get, say, 10, that's 4 extra reps, 5 pounds per rep, that's 20 pounds. So he goes up. And that keeps you in this sweet spot of effort where the weight is substantial enough to tax you and cause growth, but it makes sure that it's not so hard that it causes you to backslide. That is very, very important. And then going into, again, tricep work. Shoulders, triceps, one of the reasons these guys look so jacked, they did direct chest work, so their pecs just hung like 2 pieces of Texas toast. Big ass delts from all the front raises. You wonder why I love front raises? Not only did they get my upper body, my press straightened out when I was competing, but they're super easy to add in. They're super effective. Raises and then triceps, triceps, triceps. So that's the takeaway. Then we go into this third type of program here. So now you're seeing top single with his regular bench press grip. Then you're looking at a narrow grip for a back off set of 10. Then you're looking for a wide grip for a back off set of 10. Same idea, heavy, back off, assuming that you don't have other compound work to do. So that is just kind of a surface level look at some of the tools, some of the tricks, some of the strategies used by some of the most impressive and most dominant guys in that era. Now, real quick, I wanted to show you this from Jamie Lewis of Chaos and Pain. This is on the Plague of Strength site. Not safe for work. Don't recommend you check this out unless you got your net nanny working for you. Jamie Lewis is not one to shy away from things that are vulgar, offensive, even X-rated. But I wanted to cover this statement. This is a beginner program Roger Estep put together. The following is an occasionally illegible beginner program for powerlifters, which you might be interested to find contains a shitload of bodybuilding. Because prior to the invention of the internet, powerlifters weren't drooling fucking retards who feared hard work more than rich college girls feared work of any kind. This shit might not blow your socks off, but it might be of interest that it involves more than just the big 3 lifts, which is nigh on fucking heresy at this point with new jack lifters. So you're looking at squat, bench, deadlift. This is the same workout done 3 days per week. The one thing I want you guys to notice with these high frequency approaches, same thing with Kaz, same thing with Doug Young, they're not super complicated. A lot of times it's the same or a very slightly different variation of the workout done multiple times per week. So you don't have to overthink your training. If you have a good split, a good list of exercises that you think is productive and it hits all the odds and ends, there's no reason that you can't do it multiple times a week. So looking at this, we got squat, bench, deadlift done 3 times per week for 5 working sets, 8s and 5s. So there's that spread of mid-range reps that are done for a lot of repeating sets. Behind the neck press for 3 sets of 8, and then you got arms, you got shrugs, calves, you got all the ornaments, all the eye candy muscles, along with abdominal work. 10 exercises done 3 days per week as a beginner program to round you out, to make sure there's no weaknesses. It's not accidental, this is deliberate. If I were to pull up Boris Shako's program, it looks very similar in that there are a lot of different exercises, body weight, cables, dumbbells, step ups, all kinds of things to kind of build coordination and build you up, as opposed to just squat, bench, dead, squat, bench, dead, squat, bench, dead. So definitely worth pointing out. And it is no accident when you look at the physiques these guys had. Who's a modern day Estep? Maybe Dan Green. You can look at someone like Ben Pollack. These guys do a shit ton of work for everything, and that's what fills out their physique. You can look at Ben Pollack pre-bodybuilding and post-bodybuilding, and his physique is radically transformed. So if you want it all, if you want the mass to support those huge totals, if you also want the symmetry to make sure you have no weaknesses, and you want to look good in a Speedo, grow a mustache, follow one of these training splits, it's just a matter of months, then you can emulate the size, strength, and swagger of a 70s powerlifter. Weightlifting is an individual activity and not something that just happened as a result of basic chores or labor. Didn't really come into play until the 1800s, with weightlifting as a sport first being featured in the Olympics in 1892. The plate-loaded barbell didn't come on the scene until the early 1900s, and that contributed to the rise in physical culture in the 1940s. So in that era, there was a boom in physique development on the one side and Olympic lifting as a sport on the other, with the movements that we know as the powerlifts existing primarily as developmental movements that were used by either party. The sport of powerlifting didn't exist until 1964. It's still actually a pretty new sport, and the early participants were influenced heavily by the culture that existed up until that point. Bodybuilding and competitive lifting culture were much less segregated, so there was a lot more crossover between disciplines than you might see at the highest levels today. So it's no surprise that the first powerlifters at the beginning of the sport's existence sported a physique that looked like a goddamn curl had been done at some point during the preparation. Even as lifters in the 1970s began to figure out how to specialize specifically for powerlifting and their total, many still would not shy away from high rep sets or use that specificity as justification to ditch bodybuilding accessory work. Now, super specialization is very common today, even from complete amateurs who don't have a general lifting or sports background. But these principles can still be seen in many training programs used by elite lifters today. Westside might be known for its max effort dynamic effort split, but the repetition method, which is essentially bodybuilding work, played a huge role in making sure that the type of mass and symmetry was present that world record performances require. Boris Sheiko's programs are essentially Olympic lifting applied to powerlifting. They're incredibly specific. They involve a lot of submaximal weight, a lot of practice reps with the competition movements, just done for sets and sets and sets. But even those templates still fit in direct isolation work for muscles like the pecs, the shoulders, the hamstrings. It is known by the best performers and coaches that being strong as possible occurs when the most specialized version of you is at its most muscular. While a genetically superior and pharmaceutically enhanced lifter can get closer to that point with less work, it's generally known that the less gifted, i.e. 99% of you, have to work harder and in a more specific fashion to see a similar amount of growth. So if you want more strength at your body weight, then supercharge your nervous system with a lot of heavy weight, fewer reps, more specific application of strength training. But if you want to get as strong as possible, you need more mass, and that means you have to do mass-specific work at some point during your training. To top out your potential as a strength athlete, rep work simply is not optional. I want to give another quick thanks to this channel's other primary sponsor, Barbell Apparel, who supplies me with the most comfortable training gear on the market. It is that time of year. The Soulmate sale is ending. You can get any pair of Barbell Apparel jeans or chinos for $99, any pants, $99. Get one for yourself, get multiple, share them with your soulmate. Grab this deal before it's gone. Click the link in the description or in the pinned comment. Thank you to Barbell Apparel for making what I do possible. So pulling up Base Strength, put this book out a couple of years ago. I've been blown away by the reception. So thank you so much for the support, guys. You can find it at EmpireBarbellStore.com or on the Amazon Kindle store. 10 free programs in the back of the book. Each one serves as an example of the principles that the book does cover. Now, this one I titled 70's Powerlifter because it pulled directly from all these principles. There's high volume. It leans on not just the main movement, but variations of the main movement. It doesn't shy away from high reps. And there's also a logical progression to build off of that has hints of periodization. It's simple enough to follow, but just advanced enough that it gives you some play that you can assign work for that day based on how you feel and how recovered you are, so you don't hit a wall. So a lot of things about that I take a lot of pride in. I think it's really productive. Bull Mastiff was a program from this book that took off and a lot of people started to run and had really good results with. And that one used Doug Young's auto-regulated progression. This is the other one. I think if there was one I were to prescribe to a lot of people, most of you would be well off to run this. I think most of you would get a good result from this compared to Bull Mastiff. So on the base phase, we're looking at bench, squat, overhead, deadlift. Pretty straightforward. Now this still counts as a 2 upper, 2 lower. Remember, squatting and deadlifting, benching and overhead pressing, use a lot of the same muscles. So there's still some 2 times per week frequency there, although it's not specific to the lift. And then going into variations 1 and 2. So a lot of mechanically similar movement variations, along with a lot of bodybuilding accessory work. Definitely don't shy away from that. So the main progression for the main lifts, the bench, squat, overhead, deadlift, we're looking at these 3-week waves. So weeks 1, 2, 3, this is a volumizing approach. Remember, I talked about easing into the work, not just jumping into it as if you're going to be able to keep your head above water. So 3 sets of 10, 4 sets of 10, 5 sets of 10. Trust me, endurance increases, capacity increases so fast. You want to be able to hit your highest volume, hardest workouts that are the most productive when you're a little more conditioned. And this also gives you a break. Every time the wave resets, you're back down to 3 sets. So it doesn't just beat you over the head over and over. It gives you a ramp to grow into it. And I also give you more wiggle room. So starting out at 60%, just about anybody can do that for 3x10 on any of their lifts. Then it goes to 60 to 65. So you can increase weight based on how you feel. You can increase or decrease weight set to set within that bracket. So if you feel really good, you do all of them at 65. Maybe you do the second set at 65. You feel like crap, so you drop back. There's a lot of options here. And then going 60 to 65 to 70% on the 3rd week. And then all of those percentages just tick forward. So you end the 3rd week at a heavier range. Now you're working in 5s. Everything's a little heavier than you started, but that undulation of work back and forth allows for a natural type of recovery. It's about as good as deloading. If you can deliberately infuse workouts of reduced volume and effort, that is about as good as deloading. Going into the variations, lots of 10s, 8s, and then down to 6s. And then going into the bodybuilding work, we got, pull downs, T-bar rows, barbell curls, and all of these can be swapped out, 15s, 12s, and 10s. So we're looking at all of the volume from this era of training that we saw so much. We're looking at a similar movement selection. I'm a big fan of this tactic right here. The base phase is hypertrophy oriented. So the movement variations are more hypertrophy oriented variations, a longer range of motion, a little more disadvantaged. They work better with a tempo. So wide and incline, wide squats and front squats, behind the neck and wide grip pressing, RDLs and good mornings, all of those tax you with less weight. That's kind of the trend there. And they all put you through a greater range of motion than the main movement. Whereas when we go into the peak phase, we're looking at pause variations, which are better for neurological development, push presses, pause squats, high box squats, overloaded movements like floor bench and block deadlifts. So a lot more power-oriented development there that coincides with these numbers you're going to hit at the end, because by the end of this program, you're going to be at triples, then doubles, then singles up into a max 1. So it is very much a strength peaking program in that end. And you can take this time, if you run through each wave, you're going through 18 weeks of work. Think about the mustache you could grow at 18 weeks. If you stop waxing your chest like right now, in 18 weeks, you could have some curls on your chest that's worthy of the representation of Doug Young and his training program. So that's what I want you guys to do when you run this. So this program is absolutely free on BoostCamp. You can get it in my book, Base Strength. The link for BoostCamp is in the description. You can get this. You can get my other programs, Full Sturker, Kong, Bull Massive. You can check out other programs from the likes of Alberto Nunez, Mr. Natural Universe, who has his hypertrophy program up there. You can check out Cody Lefever's GZCL. Eric Helms has programs up there. Greg Knuckles has programs up there. A lot of good information, absolutely free. Go ahead and check that out. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Until next time, this is Bromley. I'll see you.